Hey, it's Scott Hamilton with Rockfile Radio on the Skype line with Joshua Corum from Head with Wings. Joshua, good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for taking the time out of your day.
Absolutely.
So we met online. I believe I was playing one of your songs at the time. You thanked me for playing it. We started talking, and we really got along. We had a lot of things to talk about, actually. And I was doing a little research today. And is your birthday May 23rd?
It is.
So is mine.
Oh, man, look at that.
Now I know why.
Nice.
So anyway, I discovered your music and just fell in love with it immediately. It's classified as progressive rock, but I say progressive rock, and I have a loose interpretation. Back in the day, we didn't look at Pink Floyd as a progressive rock band. It was a rock band. You know, it was a band that made music. And I think sometimes we compartmentalize things today. When you started sitting down to write some songs and make some music, what made you want to be in this genre of the musical spectrum?
Well, yeah, to give you a bit of background, I kind of came up more in like a traditional rock band setting, even pop rock. There was a period, I guess I had a stretch of impressionable years where I worked at an FYE, like a 4-year entertainment. You've probably seen them in malls.
Right.
Yeah, it's like a corporate, entertainment chain, music, movies, games. And I was seriously so fortunate to work with, a stretch of managers that just had such a great taste in music. Everyone had their own niche, you had the hip hop guy, you had the prog guy, you had the
Right.
grunge guy. Every employee had like a specialty, and I didn't really have, my niche at that time. And I had a manager Jay Taylor, that when I was like 17 or 18, just kind of like blew the lid right open for me, showing me actually 2 bands that kind of like helped shape me, Porcupine Tree and Morphine. One that kind of more so inspired me in terms of, like a philosophical direction in terms of doing a band or shaping a band, like not limiting yourself, that kind of thing. And then the other, Morphine, kind of showed me what you can do with so very little and still be just like an emotional powerhouse. So I would say probably around age 18, it was just, yeah, my whole world was blown open pretty much from these people that I was working with at my job at the time. And when I saw what you could do with music, I think I was actually, I needed like an awakening of sorts.
I think everybody
If I
kind of
didn't have
does.
that, yeah, and I was fortunate that it happened through working around music and selling music and constantly talking about music and hyping up, other people's bands. So yeah, that's what, around that period is when I first truly got introduced to prog. Like I wasn't a kid growing up listening to Pink Floyd or King Crimson or Yes or Rush. All of that kind of came after I found like a Porcupine Tree,
Right.
and I just kind of dug back in time and then worked my way forwards again.
Got to be honest, the first time I heard them, I've been in the radio industry a long time at this point. How did I never hear of these guys? It was about In Absentia time. And it changed my world because I did grow up as a prog fan. Yes, Rush, those are some of my favorite bands growing up. But I had kind of gotten out of it with the record industry and the radio industry. I'm pursuing the mainstream and the big hits and things like that. So it was very surprised to find them on a big label and nobody was playing them, and kind of why I'm here today doing this. But anyway, long story short.
And that sound was fresh to you when you first heard it. Like, did you get a sense that this was taking music in a new direction, or was it just like a new take on the old to you?
I listen to everything. I mean, being in radio, and I've done multiple formats, just about every format. And I love music. I grew up playing trumpet and things like that. But the Porcupine Tree, when I first heard it, to me, in my head, it just smacked me with, this is the right perfect mix of elements that I want to hear. I hear everything from the Beatles to Metallica in here. I hear some Marillion. I hear, I heard all sorts of things in the album. His repertoire coming out in his art. But it was the mix that this I really like. And then from that I discovered other bands. Some I liked as much, some I didn't like as much. But it opened my eyes to the prog scene again, something I had grown up with. But yeah, it was really just the right mix of things. I really liked their sound.
Right. I think prog is more like a philosophy. It's not about technicality to me. In terms of Head with Wings, I think I could see why I guess I wouldn't call it shunned, but something like Prague Archives on the web, if you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
They denied Head with Wings entry into their archive. I'd imagine because they didn't see it as a true progressive band, and that's fine. I just think it's more about the philosophy behind the ideas that we're working with. How the concepts are kind of shaped together. There's more than just. I think it's more than just having like unconventional song structures. I think that's part of it, but maybe there is a new era or wave of progressive bands, and it's just not categorically falling into what is expected of a prog band in 2018.
But I don't, as I said earlier about Floyd back in the 70s, I don't think, maybe we're doing a disservice to music to so compartmentalize it. Everybody's got to be,
I think so,
a black death metal band or a melodic death metal band, and this kind of hip hop and that kind of country and that. Why not? I'm playing music. Does it fit your taste? Do you like it? Does it move you?
Yeah. Fusion. It's just a lot of let's call us a fusion band then.
And for me, being a radio programmer, I hear a song and I go, "This might be a little more complicated, a little deeper than something that the mainstream audience that listens to Disturbed or Godsmack wants." You know what I mean? And that's why we have the two stations here. I use prog as a loose term of bands that are progressing the rock genre in ways that they learn from Yes and Rush and Porcupine Tree and things like that, and the new Catatonia and Opeth and starting to create a wider thing. And then I discovered things like the Pineapple Thief and Anathema and you guys. And I, like you said, I think it's more the way you think about things, way you're approaching things. There is a certain mentality to being a prog musician and a prog fan that you want. I don't know, something a little more complicated in your cup. Something a little deeper, something a little...
Yeah, it's just you want a rich experience.
Yes.
That's it.
So I don't ever ask artists, what do you mean by this? Because I think music works best to the individual interpretation. But to my perception, you guys tackle some pretty heavy issues in some of your songs. And you put it in such a way, I think that's a classic way of songwriting, that you can put something out there that... To you, it means one thing, but to somebody else, it means another, but they're all kind of coming to a similar conclusion. How do you distill these ideas into songs like that?
Well, for this album, it took, a whole run of years. And, I think if I had to do this album in, say, a year's time, I don't think it would have come out the way that it did. I had the luxury of really just kind of, it all started with melodies, and then words were secondary. Sometimes when you write songs, you maybe have a hook and that sticks around, and then you write around it.
Right.
But it was pretty much just taking stock of what was happening around me, and in my personal life and in society, at large, and particularly here in Connecticut, using all of that to kind of tell a story in what I'd consider a vague enough or ambiguous enough manner where people can find things to relate to. And my thought was, if you can gel certain words with melody to such a potent degree, my theory was that you'll connect with people, or that was my hope. So we didn't set out with this agenda with this album that we were gonna, I didn't have a list of things that I said I just wanted to tackle on this album. That's what kind of gives me hope for the next one, because it wasn't predetermined. And we just kind of ran with it, and the words came over time, and each song we had, let's say, 3 songs at a time that kind of gelled, good together in terms of like a narrative flow. So say tracks 7 through 9, right? There's a climax and then your conclusion. All of that worked well together before we even had, let's say, the introduction or the exposition fleshed out, and everything by kind of just looking at these songs as chapters. It all just kind of made sense to us, but it really doesn't matter so much to us if people get the story. If they do, that's great. It was really just meant to be a potent, emotionally potent listening experience, and I think you get a lot of that just from the raw music and melody of what's happening. And then for the people that, this is where you get the progressive layer, I think, is for the people that want to go one step further, you can really just start, analyzing the lyrics and connecting dots, if you will. And then you could even go one step further, and if you were truly clueless, you can use, our video content to kind of fill some gaps too.
It's funny that some bands will make a video that has absolutely nothing to do with the song, but yet it seems to work. And then other bands will tell the story in the video, and it's hard to know which is which sometimes.
Yeah, it really is. You got to be invested, I think, to really want to go down that path. Some people will listen to this album, they'll listen to a few songs, and they'll kind of put us in a box and think they have us figured out, and that's fine. But there is more going on in terms of engagement for a listener if you want it. I guess that's the key, is that if you want it. If you listen to a band like Tool, some people only ever heard them on the radio, and then you kind of just have an understanding of what they do just based off the tune. But then when you start to become a fan, you start to peel those layers back, and then you find this rich world that, all these things are kind of interconnected, or at least on the albums they are.
Some insane levels of detail.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I want this band the realm that I want this band to reside in, is that each record is this engaging, multi-layered experience. So in terms of having an agenda, I think that's probably the extent of the agenda, and then just expanding on what the precedent that we've set before.
Right.
We know. I mean, we've written material so far past this album that it's I really do have an understanding of where this is going. It'll just be a matter of how the public kind of keeps where however they're keeping us in mind over time. It's more up to them to decide.
Oh, now you're getting really proggy. If it's going to be like a trilogy or something.
I really believe these will be standalone.
Okay,
albums.
cool, yeah.
I think because even though we're not writing with the narrative at the forefront,
right,
I do think it would kind of do a disservice to the nature of some of the topics in our work, where there's a point where things would even start to feel exploitative to me. I like the idea of the next one kind of having its own world, its own set of parameters, that kind of thing.
Right. Something new to play in.
Yeah, and the music feels so new anyways, so it just would, it calls for its own treatment, I suppose.
I saw you asked on social media, who should you tour with next year? Are you making plans to tour?
Yeah, there's always hypothetical plans. I think we're farthest along in terms of maybe a few festival stops in Europe next year. Touring, is getting out there and just doing it ourselves is fine, and paving our own way, which we're on the verge of doing. But I was just kind of curious to see if what quote unquote maybe our average listener or those that have adopted us early on might have in mind. But I suppose I could have answered that question myself, because I can tell by using social media what people are into anyways.
Yep.
So it's more I was just maybe looking for some trends and seeing what people were more passionate about. We hear things like Earthside a lot, obviously because we worked with them.
Great band.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's funny that people would want to see us with Earthside when they are entirely different than us sonically, but that you want some variety on your build, and that's great. But then, stuff like the Pineapple Thief or Anathema, Stephen Wilson, those names always come up, but it's almost like, will it happen? I don't know. I guess only time will tell, but some of those bands only come over here so infrequently, and some of them don't, have opening support. So it's kind of like a pipe dream, I guess, in some regard for some of those artists, or to play with some of those artists. But
stranger things have happened.
Yeah, stranger things have happened, but nothing's totally booked yet in terms of a tour. We're really just trying to scour all of our options.
Sounds like you have big ideas for these upcoming projects. How much involved will you be with the video side of it? You going to write them, direct them, act in them?
Oh, totally involved in the writing process. I'm not so sure. I've toyed with the idea of acting in them. Maybe if it was more narrative driven, I would need a lot of time to wrap my head around that. But yeah, for every video we've done, I've been on the writing team for. Usually it's an adaptation of sort. Well, in the past, it had been an adaptation of some of the lyrics, and then it kind of turned into more of just a reflection of what it actually is. We've done 3 official videos so far, and I imagine we would do 2 or 3 more for the next album, when that's ready. And not directing, because I'm not a filmmaker per se, or I'm not a videographer. I don't really know my way around a camera. I'll never profess to be experienced in that regard. But in terms of the storytelling side, yeah, I love having my hand in all that.
Favorite song on the current album?
Our album?
Yes.
Yeah, I think From Worry to Shame, the title track, that song just always does it for me, especially performing it. It's right there in the middle of the album, and it's kind of the centerpiece, and thematically, it kind of showcases our protagonist's darkest point, but also on the other hand, it's right at that point where he does kind of make this turnaround. I don't think anyone's really picked up on yet what that twist is on the album. The last four songs or so, there is a twist that happens, but I haven't seen anybody kind of bring that to anyone's attention on, say, social media or in any reviews or what have you.
All right, we've issued a challenge.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, contact me on social media if you think what the conclusion of the album is. I'd be happy to talk about that, but I also don't. Does that spoil it for people? I don't know, because some people listen to the album and on one hand where they're just listening for the music, and then some people are actually trying to dissect it. So, is it a spoiler? I'm not sure.
It'll be up to the listener to decide.
Yeah.
So Joshua, tell us where we can get your music. Other than Rockfile Radio, where are you streaming? Where can we download? Where can we buy the CD?
Well, right now you could only pick up a CD from the Laser's Edge group. That's, we're shipping worldwide from there. They're a online distributor out of New Jersey. Otherwise, our Bandcamp is the place to get the digital album. We have it, cheaper than, let's say, Google Store or iTunes. So, Laser's Edge for physical CDs and Bandcamp for the download.
There is a segment of the audience who will ask, any plans for vinyl?
Yeah, I think we're getting closer. I have, there's, Nick is working on the layout so that we will, once we're in a place where we can press it, because we're doing all of it ourselves.
Right.
So it's just a matter of having, the funding for X, Y, or Z. But yeah, we have some cool ideas for how the gatefold is going to look. Kind of implementing, the way we handled the lyric booklet in the CD package.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to kind of translate that to vinyl in a unique way that I think people will get a kick out of. It might actually help drive home the notion that we were going for with that booklet, which was each page, each frame was supposed to kind of represent a scene from the album. So they were each lyric page was essentially like a snapshot into our character's life. So it didn't exactly come across like they were Polaroids, but it was kind of supposed to be like a scrapbook. So the booklet is essentially a scrapbook that we're then going to translate to to the gatefold, and I think that'll come across in a way that actually does more of a service to the whole aesthetic and story-driven aspect of the album.
Very exciting. I hope that comes to fruition soon.
Yeah, me too.
Well, Joshua, thanks for taking the time out today. We look forward to seeing you on the road, even if it's only festivals next year. And everybody pick up the album. It really is an amazing piece of work.
Thanks so much, Scott.